finished. I've read it. Why on earth would O.J. put in print all of his petty grievances against Nicole, his wife, his deceased wife? He didn't like that she was wearing a short skirt on the last day of her life. It made him angry. She looked like a 16-year-old. What was she doing wearing that? He didn't like her friends. He didn't like the way that she talked to him. Why on earth would he do that?
I can't answer that question, Lisa. As you know, I was totally against the book. I was appalled when I found out that it occurred. I came out publicly against it. And now, not only do I have to deal with in jury selection people's opinions about the murder case, I also have the added issue of the book and all the activity that has occurred since the book. So it certainly makes my job in trying to select a fair and impartial jury in Las Vegas much more difficult.
So you told him you didn't like the book, but he went ahead and did it. But he never consulted with you about the stolen property that he was so angry about, and he was determined to get it back?
No, because if he would have consulted with me, I would have said call the police or do nothing. I mean, listen, clearly I don't condone what occurred. You know, my function in this is to determine or help people determine whether or not it was lawful or unlawful. But would I have recommended that to a client? Absolutely not. Would I have advised a client to do it a different way? Of course I would have. I mean, nobody should ever go into a room under any set of circumstances and do this type of activity.
Why didn't they go to Las Vegas police?
Without the aid of... I agree with you. I think they should have. I think Riccio certainly should have contacted the Las Vegas Police Department, and I think O.J. should have done it too. I mean, I don't quarrel with you on that. I don't think that they used good common sense, but I certainly also do not believe that they committed any unlawful acts, because one of the cornerstones of our criminal justice system is that you have always been allowed to get back your property. And that's why I believe that this case starts and stops with the issue of whether or not it was Simpson's property, because clearly if he has a claim or right to that property, then the robbery, burglary, and all the other charges go by the wayside.
And the man who had possession of that property testified, Bruce Vermong. He's one of the alleged victims. Let's take a quick listen to some of his testimony.
When Mr. or defendant Simpson came into the room, did he say anything?
When he came in, when he first came in, he kind of stopped for just a second and looked at me, and I kind of looked at him. And there was a lot of yelling and screaming going on, and the first thing that I really remember from that was a statement made by Mr. Simpson saying, "Don't let anybody out of this room, nobody leaves."
And you hear that on the tape, Yale, and to me, when I hear a statement like that, it sounds like this is the man who's in charge. So I don't care if he's holding the gun or not. If anyone that he's in charge of is holding a gun, it's just as bad as if O.J. Simpson's holding the gun. He's in charge in that room, isn't he?
Well, I think there are two issues. One issue is who's in charge of the people with the guns, and who's in charge of trying to get the, you know, the heirlooms back. And clearly Simpson is in charge of trying to get the heirlooms back. Listen, it's clear, Vinny, from the tape that he's extremely upset. He finally sees this stuff that he's been looking for. He honestly didn't know whether to believe Mr. Riccio or not, but it turns out that everything that Mr. Riccio had told O.J. Simpson about people trying to deal with things that were stolen from his house come true. And he's basically saying, listen, nobody's leaving. We need to talk about this. I want my stuff back. And, you know, you can see people say, look, Mike took it. Take the stuff. You know, Mike took it. We had nothing to do with it. We didn't know it was stolen. You know, when you could play further Bruce's testimony on his cross-examination, where he says, well, you know, I got it from Mike. I wrote checks for this stuff. Well, obviously, at the preliminary hearing, we haven't had time to subpoena those records, but he better have them, because we're going to look for them, and we're going to ask for them, and it better be on there that he bought this in the lawful stream of commerce. Otherwise, he could be looking at criminal charges himself.
And the other fascinating character in this case is Thomas Riccio. Let's take a listen to some of his testimony.
We were going to have cameras set up. O.J. felt that there's been many times over the last few years that people have been disrespecting him, stealing his stuff. He wanted to set a precedent and catch these guys and show the world and maybe do interviews after we caught these guys.
Yale Galanter, Thomas Riccio, is he a friend or foe of O.J. Simpson's at this point?
Well, I think he's neutral. I think he testified very credibly and honestly on the witness stand. I mean, clearly, he's the only witness.
He's the credible one.
And look,
he's the credible one.
Out of all of the incredible people, he has the most credibility, only because he didn't do anything to try and hide the fact that he had a motive here. You know, he wanted O.J. to sign 200 copies of the I Did It or If I Did It book. He clearly said that he was looking to make money and market the tape. You know, he clearly said that the reason he tape recorded it was because, you know, he had been burned in the past. So,
burned might not be the word you want to use. Burned might not be the word you want to use with Thomas Riccio, convicted of arson, grand larceny, receiving stolen goods. Yeah, he's a peach.
Unbelievable. And he's the credible one. He's the one recording everything. He's the one that's recording. He's not telling anybody that they're recording him. And he's the one that we're going to rely on. Well, I guess some of the stuff he says is corroborated by the recording. Same recording that I'm making of this show right here on this recorder.
He certainly didn't come into court and try and hide anything.
Yeah.
Well, as far as we know, Yale, I mean, I think it may be a little disingenuous to say he's neutral. He's neither friend nor foe. I mean, I understand that O.J. owes him about 200 signed books, or at least Riccio thinks that O.J. owes him some books. Riccio wants to continue doing business with O.J. He wants to curry favor with O.J. I mean, come on. He's got a bias in this case, doesn't he, Yale?
Lisa, you know, you'd have to ask him as to whether or not he had a bias. You know, my opinion was he was credible, and the reason I think he was credible was because I didn't have to impeach him with anything he lied about in court.
That's because he gave testimony favorable to you. Why would you impeach him?
No, it had nothing to do with that. He was called, Lisa, he was a government witness. We didn't call him. The government called him.
I understand that. I don't understand why they called him. I don't understand why they did. I think he's a defense witness.
But obviously, as a government witness, Mr. Roger and Mr. Owens thought that Mr. Riccio could add to the government's case.
Yeah, well, I don't get that. But all I can say is this. You didn't like Walter Alexander. You bring up the pimping past, the alleged pimping past. Very nicely, by the way. Okay, you like Riccio, so you don't bring up the arson, the receiving stolen property, the grand larceny, right? Because you're no fool. You know which side your bread is buttered on, Yale.
But that's my job. I mean, you know, I'm a defense lawyer. I'm supposed to bring out the facts in the light most favorable to my client. There's certainly nothing wrong with that. What, you know, everybody else needs to realize is that the government thought that Mr. Riccio could be a beneficial witness to them. Otherwise, they would have never called him.
All right, yeah, we only have a few seconds here. What is the one fact that you're most concerned about in this case?
The jury. Clearly, people's opinions about O.J. Simpson are so just engraved in their soul. You know, when I go to cocktail parties, people come up to me and they give me opinions on whether he did it, whether he didn't do it. Now, you know, and they want to try and convince me and talk to me, and that's really the problem because, you know, I think you guys were talking about it before I came on the air. You know, there are a lot of people who are going to want to be on this jury because they're going to have their own... Right, they're going to have...
Well, we are out of time, unfortunately. I'll tell you, Yale, the most shocking fact I learned at this prelim is that you've been practicing law for 30 years. Just it's preposterous to me. I had no idea. I thought you were about
Doogie Galanter.
All right, we're running out of time. Special thanks to attorney Yale Galanter for joining us this morning. I could talk to you all day. Thanks so much, Yale. And as we go